China had a plan to dominate technology and become the world's most powerful country, and it's all gone wrong. Chinese President Xi Jinping: Beijing is furious. China's leadership knows that it's losing the race for the future of technology. It's a race that could make or break the country's superpower status, and Washington is determined to do everything possible to slow this down. Semiconductor chips are the tiny brains that power our technological world, from cars and cell phones to fighter jets and advanced missile systems. They're so complex that no country can produce a single chip by itself. In years past, it was a good thing. Governments understood that technology is not a zero-sum game, that innovation in one place can push the whole world forward. This understanding created stability. An attack on any part of the global dispersed semiconductor supply chain can bring the world to a standstill. But that's all changed now that the US and China are locked in a tech Cold War. In this war, chips are the weapons. China has spent tens of billions of dollars to catch up to the most elite chip makers over the past few decades, a race that has intensified under President Xi Jinping, but development has stalled. One of China's valued vaulted chip makers, Tsinghua Uni Group, has gone bankrupt. The men who run the industry are caught in a never-ending corruption probe, and the US is intent on blocking China's access to the foundational technologies that make chip production possible. China's chip development program has been a totally mixing bag. Paul Trillo, semiconductor expert, Senior Vice President for China and Technology Policy at the consultancy Albright Stonebridge Group, said, "It's not about money. Right now, China is awash in money for technology, but you need the right people and customers that trust you. All of that you cannot buy." Beijing understands that controlling production of advanced chips will not only enrich its economy but boost China's geopolitical influence. To Xi Jinping, semiconductors and the technologies they facilitate are the main battleground in the global contest for power. The US understands that if it allows China to control advanced chip production, Beijing will have the tools it needs to become the world's preeminent superpower. Leyland Miller, the founder of research firm China Beige Book, told me that while Washington has stymied Beijing to some extent, there's no guarantee America's lead will be maintained. And there's just nothing more important than this, he said. Peak globalization. Semiconductor chips don't just power today's technology, they're the tiny keys that will unlock the next world-changing innovations like quantum computing and artificial intelligence. Right now, a chip cannot be made without contributions from all over the world: chemicals from Germany, machines from Japan and the Netherlands, packaging and testing in China and Malaysia. The supply chain is a product of globalization, trust, and free capital markets. But there are some parts of this chain that are more critical, more delicate, and more lucrative. The most advanced chips, the smallest chips with the most processing power, require extremely specialized knowledge to design and manufacture. The machines and factories that make these chips are engineering feats in and of themselves, requiring tens of billions of dollars of investment to develop. The bulk of these cutting-edge chips are designed by US companies and manufactured in Taiwan and South Korea. A 2021 report from Boston Consulting Group said Taiwan produces 92% of all chips at 10 nanometers or smaller, while South Korea made the other 8%. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, Taipei's crown jewel, is set to produce 3 nanometer chips by the end of this year, while the South Korean Samsung recently started their 3 nanometer chip manufacturing in the United States, Intel not far behind. China's leading semiconductor company, Semiconductor Manufacturing International Corporation, claims to be able to make the smallest 7 nanometer chips, though analysts have yet seen them. Samsung and TSMC were at 7 nanometers 4 years ago. Experts have told me that without trust and cooperation from the rest of the world, especially the US and its East Asian allies, it's nearly impossible to make breakthroughs in semiconductor technology. China is stuck behind the very countries that have become its main adversaries, but the stakes are too high for Beijing to give up. Why China needs the chips? The Chinese company is big, but it is not wealthy. China's 2021 GDP per capita ranked just below Antigua and Barbuda's and above Thailand's. The country has spent more than a decade growing its economy through debt-driven infrastructure development, but that strategy is becoming less productive, leaving China with a growing number of debt-ridden zombie companies and ghost cities. To avoid getting caught in the middle-income trap, it needs to start developing higher-value businesses. In other words, China needs a more lucrative line of business, the same way someone with credit card debt needs a raise. Harking back to the days of Mao Zedong, Xi Jinping is staking the future of the country on state-led industrial development plans, most notably the Made in China 2025 plan. Xi Jinping has stressed that the entire country needs to help size the technology lifeline, and figuring out how to design the manufacturing chips is central to the plan's success. And Xi Jinping has been backing up this philosophy with cash. Since he became president in 2012, the country has invested over $100 billion in chip development, but much to Beijing's chagrin, the outpouring of the money has produced lackluster results. Money was handed to fashion brands or the construction firms that became chip makers overnight in order to get some cash. The government gave tens of billions of dollars to Zhao Weigu, the CEO of Tsinghua Unigroup, who is known in Chinese media as the semiconductor madman. As you might expect, Beijing suspects Zhao blew its money like a drunken sailor on shore leave, and he is now under investigation. The Made in China 2025 plan lays out a goal for domestically manufactured chips to meet 70% of China's semiconductor needs within 3 years. However, state media suggested that as of 2019, China was supplying only 30% of its own needs. The researcher IC instigates that the percentage for 2020 is even lower at about 16%. China is catching up to parts of the semiconductor supply chain with lower batteries to entry, like designing the chips. Trolio told us, but the manufacturing and manufacturing equipment side, they're way behind. He said you can't steal that either, because the secret sauce in a lot of this implicit knowledge is implicit knowledge. You can't fake your way into commercial viability and sustainable model. Chips also play a key role in modernizing China's military. Not all of China's military equipment requires state-of-the-art chips. Not all of the U.S. Department equipment does either, but it's clear that Beijing understands that being able to manufacture state-of-the-art chips will make huge difference in future conflicts. In a 2021 report to Congress, a U.S. commission made up of technologists and researchers made it clear to American lawmakers that while China may be behind on developing its own chips, Beijing's semiconductor push must be taken seriously. For the first time since World War II, America's technological predominance, the backbone of its economic and military power, is under threat. China possesses the might, the talent, and ambition to surpass the United States as the world's leader in AI in the next decade if current trends do not change. An angry Uncle Sam. 2 years ago, Xi Jinping said in a speech that because of the world has undergone profound changes unseen in a century, China would need to expedite its technological, military, and economic development. The subtext of the speech was clear that after decades of biding its time, China was starting to gain equal footing among the global superpowers, and it was time for China to assert itself. Over the past few years, Washington spoke has spoken up to Xi's aggression and begun to see China's technological development as not only an economic challenge, but a matter of national security. During Trump administration, departments across federal government worked to deny Chinese tech firms access to the lifeblood of their business. Commerce made it clear so that Chinese companies could not buy certain American-made products. Treasury blocked Chinese companies from taking over American companies that work on semiconductors, and state used diplomatic pressure to get allies to limit sales to China. The clearest example of this approach came in 2019, when the U.S. cut off Chinese telecom giant Huawei. The Justice Department accused the company of doing business with Iran and North Korea in violation of international sanctions. As punishment, Washington denied Huawei the use of advanced chip components containing U.S. intellectual property, and now the company is on its knees. Its CEO, Ren Zhengfei, has said the company must make survival our main goal for the next 2 years. Bonnie Glasser, director of the Asian program as the German Marshall Fund of the United States, said, "We went after the company with a really fulsome way. America's excommunication of Huawei and its ability to choke China off from the semiconductor game would not have been possible without Taiwan," Glasser said. The U.S. has not officially recognized Taiwan, an island nation off the coast of China that Beijing claims is its own, since the 1970s. Instead, the American government holds a one China policy that condemns any attack on by Beijing on the island of Taiwan, but also acknowledges it is technically a part of China. Taiwan built up its chip industry in part of the defense mechanism. The country's state-of-the-art semiconductor factories, or fabs, act as a silicon shield to deter China from invading. China is the world's biggest importer of chips, and the world would suffer if the complex fab that manufactured chips went offline for any reason. But over the next few decades, as the idea of taking back Taiwan becomes more central to Chinese politics and the country's military gets stronger, that shield could be tested. The Chinese are not going to decide whether or not to invade Taiwan based on their need for semiconductors, Glasser said. This is about the sovereignty of the Chinese Communist Party. But that does not mean Beijing won't get angry, because recently the United States proposed a semiconductor consortium in Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan called Chip 4. Chinese state TV called the move discriminatory and exclusive, and said it threatened to fragment the global market. The consortium has its detractors in the U.S. too. The former State Department diplomat focused on East Asia expressed skepticism that South Korea and Taiwan would work seriously with the U.S. to box out China because it could put their sales to Chinese customers at risk. The U.S. is leaning on its European allies as well. U.S. officials have barred Advanced Semiconductor Material Lithography, a Dutch company that makes the machines that etch writing onto the circuits of advanced chips through a process called lithography, from selling advanced machinery to Chinese chip makers. The U.S. also took a page from Beijing's industrial policy book when Congress passed the CHIPS Act, designed to funnel $250 billion towards revitalizing research in tech connected to semiconductors. And while this money could help keep the U.S. ahead of China in the chips arms race, Washington will need to rely on the free market and international collaboration to truly counter Beijing's ambition. Maintaining the U.S.'s lead will be particularly tricky, given the key chip material, suppliers, and chip manufacturers' capacity are concentrated in East Asia. Miller of China Beige Book said, "There's no guarantee that throwing money at semiconductor companies will create the supply chain resilience we need. Still, he thinks our policies around chips are not stronger than they were 10 years ago." The challenge for Washington is maintaining a proactive rather than reactive mindset about innovation. No rest for the winners. The world is pulling back from China for reasons beyond geopolitics. Beijing's COVID-0 strategy created a great uncertainty in the economy. Xi Jinping increasingly grabbing control of the economy, putting pressure on foreign companies to do business the way he wants. And Beijing should not be underestimated, though, especially not in technology. In the 1960s and 70s, when China was poor, state scientists still managed to develop a hydrogen bomb and a nuclear bomb and launch a satellite. The Chinese exalted these efforts, knowing in the country known as two bombs, one satellite, as a feat of development and proof of the country's ability to punch above its weight. Xi Jinping is trying to imbue this chip effort with the same spirit. He has no other option. Losing the semiconductor race means China will always be at the mercy of countries with more power over the chip supply chain like US and Taiwan, and that is not something Xi Jinping will tolerate. This is by Lynette Lopez on Business Insider. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box